name is Bree. I've been here for about 3.5 years, and one of the best parts about my job is that I get to bring all of you through Thomas Jefferson's home. And we have a lot to cover on this tour, but we like to start that story at the very beginning. So, kind of can't see it today, but behind all this fog, at the very base of the mountain, there is a piece of land just across the Rivanna River, about 200 acres, called Shadwell Plantation. And that is where Thomas Jefferson's born, and that is where he'll grow up. And he's about 14 years old, going to boarding school locally in Charlottesville, when he hears the news of his father's death from an unknown stomach illness, leaving a young 14-year-old boy being the eldest son, legally and financially in charge of the entire 7,000-acre estate. Is a lot for a 14-year-old boy to handle. And if you assumed that he wouldn't be able to be up for the task, you'd be correct. His father will add a clause to his will stating that his eldest son cannot make any decisions legally or financially until he's 21 years of age, which makes a lot of sense. Leaves him open to continue his education through boarding school, local pastors, even going back to his family estate, Tuckahoe. He spends a lot of time studying, like a little sponge, soaking up everything that he can. When he's 18 years old, he officially enrolls in college at the Royal College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He's mainly studying under one professor. His name is George Witt. He's studying the law. And while he's studying law, it takes about 2.5 years to do so. When he's done, all he has to do is summarize everything he just read to 2 lawyers. If they agree he did it well enough, now he can practice law professionally. And you can still get your law degree the same way as Thomas Jefferson in the Commonwealth of Virginia today. So be careful when you hire your Virginia lawyers. Jefferson's a pretty reputable lawyer for quite a while, but he starts to focus on other aspects of education. We love to call him a self-taught architect. So in his early 20s, he will compile everything he loves into one structure he will call Monticello, or in Old Italian, Little Mountain, to be built. Up here on the top of this mountain will be a 2-story house, 8 rooms, looks like a Greek and Roman temple meets an English countryside estate. He thinks this is going to take about 5 years to build. Turns out it'll take about 20 years to build. And this is just the first house. During the 20 years it takes to construct the first Monticello, he will marry his wife Martha, a recent widow, on a blizzardy cold New Year's Day 1772. Now, they'll be married for 10 years, and during that she'll be primarily here at Monticello overseeing construction with a few other leading men. You've got half white craftsmen, half enslaved Africans building this house Jefferson designed, and he's barely here to see it anytime it's being constructed. He comes in every so often just to see how things are going, and he's mainly doing this because he's serving in various political roles. Starting out as a member of the House of Burgesses, after about a decade of boycotting taxes against the king, he will essentially lose his job when the king shuts down the system of government. He'll end up becoming a delegate of Virginia, traveling up to Philadelphia. He will then be chosen as the chairman of the Committee of 5. Have any of you been in a group project before? And one of you did most of the work. That's how Thomas Jefferson feels. Being in that Committee of 5, only one of those men is actually writing all of the grievances we have against the King of England. We now call that the Declaration of American Independence. He will create this list, and he thinks all 56 delegates are going to believe in what he has to say. They'll then sit for 2 weeks as they make 87 changes to it. They finally ratified on the 4th of July, sign it on August 2nd. He returns to Monticello to see the birth of a child, part of the construction. He's also a traitor to the king, which is really funny because his next job is governor of Virginia. Primarily governor during the American Revolution, and he will do incredibly poorly as he has little to no military strategy of a background, so he ends up doing poorly and will end up fleeing Richmond a few weeks before the end of his term limit is over, and he's doing so because the British are burning the city to the ground to flush out signers of the Declaration. So Jefferson arrives to Monticello, does his last few days in office, then he eventually has to run away from Monticello as well, so things are not looking good for him. He decides to accept another job only a few years later, 1782. After the death of his wife Martha, she will have 6 children, and only one of those children will one day live past the age of 27. So Jefferson, surrounded by loss often with losing children, has just now lost a wife, decides with the 3 surviving children he still has at that time, he will leave 2 behind, take the eldest Martha and an enslaved man named James Hemmings, and he will travel to France for 5 years. And while he is gone, he pauses construction because he thinks he might make a few adjustments to the house. He will end up redesigning the entire structure. It will take another 20 years to construct. He wanted to be here to see that, but other people had other plans. He will be selected by George Washington as our first Secretary of State, then serving as our second Vice President, and finally 2 terms as our 3rd U.S. President. He finally retires for real this time in 1809. He comes back to Monticello. The house is about 99% completed, so he can finally move in and live for the last 17 years in the structure he waited 40 years to be built for him. He invites family to move back in, and at any given time, we have roughly 25 members of his family here at the house, either staying permanently or coming to visit. but also invited guests and a whole lot of uninvited guests, and between 60 to 100 enslaved African men, women, and children are also on the mountain. So please picture this place incredibly busy at all hours of the day. He often called this home his autobiographical masterpiece, but once told his neighbor James Monroe that his home has become the curiosity of the neighborhood. So with that in mind, let's head up through the uninvited guest entrance.
If you are going into the house or have already been into the house, you probably know that Thomas Jefferson owned a lot of things, and that we're fortunate to have about 2/3 of the objects in the house that belong to the family on display in there. In the case of the enslaved people who lived here along Mulberry Road, they didn't own a whole lot. Now let me backtrack a little bit, because Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, speaks to the issue of slavery by saying it is abominable and that he believes it should be abolished over time. But he puts it in words like this. He says, the abolition of domestic slavery is the wish of those colonies where it was unhappily introduced in their infant state. So in other words, he also, in that first document, before it is corrected by the other four working on the draft, he addresses that by saying it's really the British Crown that we need to blame for this. And so we have that part of Thomas Jefferson's thinking. But this Age of Enlightenment influence over him and many other intellectuals of his time period impacts their view upon race. Whites are at the upper echelon, indigenous native groups in the middle, inferior, the African descent people. And this is the basis of using slavery and making it acceptable to those who are going to use it, because to them it is the fact that they are inferior, they need our care, we need them. It's sort of a back and forth thing, but there's really no attitude like we have today.
Thomas Jefferson believed human freedom was the surest path to human progress. To that vision, he devoted his life. Jefferson served Virginia as governor, founded and designed the University of Virginia, and wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. He drafted the Declaration of Independence and served his new country as Minister to France, Secretary of State, Vice President, and for 2 terms as President of the United States. Monticello was the center of Jefferson's world. He inherited some 3,000 acres from his father, and in 1768 began construction on top of the little mountain he had roamed as a boy. Over time, the plantation grew to 5,000 acres. Jefferson was a self-trained architect. In designing Monticello, he drew on the architecture of ancient Rome and contemporary Paris for inspiration. Like the new nation, it was always a work in progress. He imagined, reimagined, and had the house built and rebuilt over a span of 40 years. Monticello was a plantation in central Virginia. It was home to the Jeffersons and the families of free and enslaved workers, including as many as 140 enslaved African-American men, women, and children. The enslaved people at Monticello labored for Jefferson and his family from dawn till dusk, 6 days a week, in the fields, orchards, gardens, in the shops along Mulberry Row, the main plantation street, and in the main house. Members of the Hearn, Gillette, Hemmings, and other families became field workers, blacksmiths, woodworkers, stone cutters, brewers, weavers, and cooks trained in the arts of French cuisine. Within the cruel institution of slavery and the confines of their bondage, enslaved people developed strong family ties and a dynamic community of their own, independent of Jefferson. Throughout 40 years of public service, Jefferson often said he would rather be at Monticello, but he spent half his adult life away serving his nation. Jefferson became a powerful spokesman for a revolutionary generation, one that created a new nation based on radical ideas. In 1776, at the age of 33, he was asked to draft a Declaration of Independence from Great Britain.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another.
When most people in the world lived at the mercy of those who were born into power, these words unleashed a revolutionary idea that all men had equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In reality, women, African Americans, and other minorities were excluded from Jefferson's vision of liberty. 1/5 of the American population lived in slavery. Jefferson was an early advocate for ending slavery and wrote that it was a moral and political evil that threatened America's future. But he remained a slaveholder and freed only 10 people in his lifetime. Among those he held in bondage were Sally Hemings and the children he fathered with her. This legacy remains Jefferson's glaring contradiction.